Was it all just a total failure? No, it wasn't all a total failure, but I'm out here in the garden harvesting what I can of these onions, which were almost a total failure. And I thought I'd do a video on just a little last of the season garden update, kind of talk about how things went and what I'm looking forward to improve on next year. So if you guys are new here, my name is Curtis Stone. I used to be the urban farmer, but I'm no longer living in the hellhole cities. I'm out in the country and I'm off grid, and I'm making a go of doing everything I can off the land that I live in, at least everything I need to live with myself and my family. So with that, let's take a look at the garden. So I'm up here in this is the first plot that I planted this year. And this is on one of these constructed terraces that I have in the on the garden, and it was the first one I built, and it was probably the worst one I built because I learned how to do it better each time. So this has been onions all season. And this is where this crop gets really sad, is these were planted March 12th. So they were seeded March 12th and they were transplanted about a month and a half later, and they have not grown all season. These leeks have done a little bit better, but these did terrible. I'd say I'm looking what I'm getting here. Really, really immature onions. They should be huge, having a whole growing season. I mean, spring, summer, and fall in the garden. But it really came down to fertility here, and this kind of ties into the overall lesson for me this year is when you're starting with soil that you harvest yourself. So I harvested this soil. I've got a soil pit back up here on the property, and I've harvested all this soil from this sort of really slow kind of drainage area where soil had just settled over time. But it's forest soil. It's not like pastured soil with animals on it. It's forest soil. So it's got organics in it, but just doesn't have a lot of fertility in it because it hasn't had like animals, ruminant animals, manuring it and building up that fertility over time. So it's a tough place to start, and I basically under-fertilized. I re-fertilized later with a liquid fertilizer, some fish fertilizer, and all certified organic stuff, kelp. What else? Yeah, just kind of a mix of these different organic liquid fertilizers. And I thought it was going to help it. I did that in about August, but it just wasn't enough to really get this crop finished, which is crazy. It really does show how this soil needs so much fertility. But for my crops that didn't need a ton of fertility, they did great. And we'll look at some of those. But yeah, so this was all potatoes. That's all been harvested. I've got another block of potatoes that I have to harvest today, and I'll show you that before I harvest it. I also had carrots here, which have now been fully cropped out. I just cropped out the last bed. That's about 30 pounds of carrots. That came off of this. So everything that I grew in this plot didn't do very well. The potatoes did the best. The potatoes, actually, their yield was what I would expect a normal potato crop to be. But everything else in here did very poorly. I had beans and peas interplanted in here. They did terribly. Same thing, I had beans here. I had a trellis here. Just did terrible. So yeah, we're going to have to bring in, I'm hoping I can bring in a lot of compost this coming year. And I've got more infrastructure now that I can actually do that myself. I've got a dump trailer that I can go and get, I think, a few yards at a time and dump it. And so I can build it up better next year, which is what I really want to do. Down here in this plot, this one didn't do very well either. These cabbages were late to plant to begin with. But yeah, I didn't do that great. So, and this area too hasn't been good in the fall because it's literally all the ground around it comes up, and because I have this greenhouse here, cold just concentrates here. So I think this will be great spring and summer, but didn't do very well in the fall. So coming into the high tunnel, this is going well. This one is doing great. We've got a good crop for winter. And broccoli, I should have planted a little bit later, but we had this really unreal this really warm fall. And just until a week and a half ago, I was working with my shirt off every day outside. And that's crazy because that was basically by mid to late November, it was still t-shirt weather outside every day. So phenomenal fall. And it's either I planted this too early or the season being as late as it was didn't help the broccoli. So it's gone to seed. But we've been feeding it to the chickens. And we did get a few picks off it before it did that. But the rest of this tunnel is just cold crops. So I've got fresh carrots, a whole bed. I have way too many carrots. But fortunately, I have a friend who's close by who has a surplus of onions and doesn't have any carrots. So I'm going to do a trade with her, which is going to be fantastic. But we've got cold greens in here, spinach, some late stuff I seeded, didn't really germinate too well. Some turnips didn't take too well. These, this was Hackeri turnips, I think, in here. That didn't come up very well. No, that was arugula, sorry. That was arugula. That didn't come up well. Radishes, okay. This is a couple different varieties of red and French breakfast radishes. Red Russian kale coming along well. Lettuce is coming along well. Another crop of spinach coming along well. Black kale, lacinato kale with a couple winter boar kales in there. This is coming along well. We still have field kale from outside in our little home garden bed. So that's been giving us what we need. But and it's nice because we've barely harvested any of this going into winter. So that means that this will continue to grow for a while still in this greenhouse. And we'll be harvesting it all winter. And some Brussels sprouts coming along here. And they actually are forming the little Brussels sprouts on them. So we'll see if they make it or not. Hopefully they do. Because in this greenhouse, the conditions can be warm enough in the day for these crops to grow. And right now in here, it's about 6 degrees and wet outside. It's about 10 degrees Celsius in here, 50 Fahrenheit. And it can grow in that temperature for quite some time. So another crop of spinach. I've harvested this a bunch already, and I can even see the bit of yellowing. It's again, the soil nutrient is very challenging out here when you're building soil from scratch. Beets, some nice big beets in here. The green's starting to die back a bit just because of the cold, and that's okay. The beets, as long as I'll explain something in a minute, but they're doing great. And then this is some cauliflower. Actually is forming some heads in there. So we'll see. Oh yeah, look at that. There's some decent sized ones in there. So those might continue to grow as well. But the key in this greenhouse right now is keeping the water off the soil. So all the crops are established enough that they have deep enough roots that they no longer need water. If I were to get a couple freak really warm days and it got up to 30 Celsius in here or like 80 Fahrenheit, then I would probably want to water. But the general rule of thumb that I follow is if it's not above 10 degrees Celsius, I don't water. And the primary reason for that is to stop freezing. And this is particularly important with the root crops, is that if we get a soaker, and if this is outside, say, and then it drops down to like minus 10, 20, 15 Fahrenheit, then the soil will freeze and then it'll thaw and it'll basically turn that root crop into crap. So that's why it's really important to keep crops dry once the cold weather sits in. And again, it's November 1st today. So this is really, so far it's been nice. Last winter we had more snow earlier on. Now let's go around this way. So coming around this greenhouse here, another crop of potatoes. So these have all died back, which is great. This is the next thing I'm going to be harvesting, is all these. And yield so far this year has been fairly good. Not as high as I normally get, but I'm getting a pound per linear foot. So I've done 2 rows on these beds and I'm getting a pound per linear foot. Usually I get a pound per plant. So my yield this year so far is half of what I've already half of what I would normally expect. But I've already harvested 320 pounds from the first block that we were in, and from 2 other beds that we'll go look at as well. But so I'm expecting to be sitting on about Well, these are 16-foot beds. So yeah, I should get at least another 100 pounds out of this. So we'll be sitting on about 400 pounds of potatoes for winter. So coming up into this higher block up here, this was all corn. I had a little bit of zucchini over there, just a couple plants. And I've seeded clover on this bank, and that's actually taken quite well. Pickling cukes here, asparagus. I might move that asparagus next year, but pickling cukes were fantastic. Oh, little kid meltdown, that's okay. But the corn was unreal. We just yesterday harvested the rest of it, and this was a late planting, and we didn't really think it would make it, but because we had such a late fall, it just worked out amazingly. So we have 2 more terraces that I have yet to develop, here and here. These are the trusses for the house that we're going to be building, and they're sitting there covered. But once we build the house next year, we'll develop this terrace as well. I could start on this one anytime, but no need to at this point in the season. And this area up here on the property I have yet to do anything with, but eventually I'm going to put more trees and things like that around here, fruit trees. But the soil up here is very bony, and there's no nutrient in it. So everything I do up here I have to build, and that's okay. It just takes time. So coming over to this terrace, this is the one that's right in front of our house. And just the other day I cropped out, these were 2 beds of potatoes, Yukon Golds. Got a huge yield off that. And some other cabbage. This cabbage has done a lot better than the stuff down there. And I don't know, I'm gonna actually put a tunnel over it, a low tunnel, because I think I could actually get this. They're forming up some fairly, like, these are some nice size, decent sized heads in here. So I'm gonna just protect it from the snow and see how long I can keep it going. But after I harvested these potatoes, I just pulled the mulch in my walkways on the bed, just so that, and I'm gonna do that everywhere I don't have a crop planted, if I have enough mulch there, just to prevent erosion over the winter rains as they come, and spring rains too. And some more carrots here. I'm going to cover this one as well and see how far I can push it with those. This was a bean crop. It was fantastic. We did a bunch of different types of shelling beans. We couldn't even get it all, but we've been picking these for at least a month, and we got a ton of harvest off them. If we had another, again, another thing I could have planted earlier, but I didn't get this finished in time. So kind of in the first year of this garden, I have to construct everything. And so it's been a real challenge to construct it and plant it. Going into the next season, it's going to be a lot better. Coming into the heated high tunnel. It's not heated at the moment, but the climate battery is running. So this one has a climate battery. It's fairly shallow. It's not as nearly as big or deep as the other one we're going to go look at in a second, but it does have one. And this greenhouse also has hydronics, and it's not fired up yet, but we are just starting to put it together. So it has pipes that go into the ground, and we've got boiler lines that come in from a boiler that is supposed to arrive soon. But this greenhouse was all tomatoes and peppers and weed. Cannabis is all harvested now, but that's what it was all season. This thing didn't get finished until summer, early summer, I think. So it was enough to get the tomatoes in, but it was a fairly short season for them. And also, again, fertility was a real challenge in this greenhouse, or with the soil, just like everything else. And so it's going to be, we're going to have to really, really beef up the soil here going into next season. But now that I can bring in compost, I can get a bit more proactive with it. There's just so much work doing all these things. And if you've been following my vlogs, especially the ones at FromTheField.tv, which is where most of them are, you saw me build all this stuff, and it's a ton of work. It's coming into the main greenhouse, the passive solar greenhouse. My kids, this is functioning as a kids playhouse more than anything right now. But I finished this floor for this greenhouse. Took me 2.5 days. It was a ton of work. But we've got a lot of good stuff in here right now. It's warm in here right now. It is, well, it's not that warm. It's 12 degrees. It's like got up to 15 today, but no heat. But it will barely fluctuate in here, and you can actually see that kind of here on the thermostat. This is a high-low thermostat. So this shows how high it reached by setting this needle, and then how low it reached by setting this needle. So this greenhouse is only fluctuating by 5 degrees Celsius. And it's basically just cold and damp and cloudy outside. We're producing very little solar. I think right now there might be 1.2 kilowatts coming in. But yeah, it's stable in here. The great thing about a greenhouse like this has a very deep climate battery. It's 6 feet deep, packed with sand, has 2 layers of pipes in it. And so it's heat gets very deep in the climate battery on this one. And yeah, it's very stable. The walls are R40. These windows are incredible. What they're rated for, I can't quite tell you, but they do this neat thing where they open like this, and then they open like this. And those are from a company called Initech. And that's what we've used in here. So this is the main greenhouse. And there's a lot in here. We've still got lots of peppers coming. The tomatoes just keep going. I keep pruning them back, but they keep going. These ones just kind of boosted again. They just keep going. I took about 20 pounds of foliage off that a few days ago. And then I've got this other bed in here, which only gets sun during the winter, really, or call it 4 months of the year. And right now is one of those times. And I've got a bean crop coming along that actually has new beans. I've got new cukes coming along. These plants look very healthy. And the plan with these is to grow them up and over this, up to that purlin right there. This purlin here. And if they make it that far, we'll see. Some lemongrass. I have grapes all on the ends of these beds, and they are going to grow up these eventually. And this one's getting pretty good for the first year. And the idea there is that it'll shade this greenhouse out in the summer, and then it'll drop its foliage in the winter. Some herbs, some chard, celery, new crop of peas, which we've been picking for a while now. They're pretty much done. Some more herbs, not really doing too well. Some strawberries I left. I brought a bunch of them outside, actually. And I didn't explain one thing that I did in the garden. By my red tote over there, there's a little area that I put strawberries in that were originally in here. And yeah, this space is kind of a hangout space. We got it set up for the winter to just spend more time in here. Eventually our house, when it's finished, is the next building over, and it'll be connected with the staircase here and a deck up above. And we'll be able to kind of seamlessly walk in and out of this from our house. One thing worth showing here in this greenhouse is this is my winter water system. So this year, because our house isn't finished, and this is our build site there, building an ICF house, at least on the bottom level. And then the top level will be level with this office connected by a deck. But our water comes out of a well, actually comes right through a big trench we dug there. And so once the house is finished, the well and that water will be fully winterized, and we can pull water from the well all winter, and it'll be piped to this eventually. But this year it isn't. So what I've done is I've built a really simple IBC tote water system for greenhouse watering, and maybe I'll do a separate video on this another time. But essentially it's just 2 IBC totes plumbed together, and then there's a pump, and that pump, once it's turned on, pumps and connects to the water system in this greenhouse. So I have to basically turn off the water from that's coming in here, which I'm going to do very shortly for the winter, and then it'll all just be internal. And what'll happen when I run this pump is that the pump will always have a place to go, so I don't blow the pump. So it goes to a T, and then it'll tee off to the main water system here. And then there'll be an overflow that it's actually connected right now, but it'll flow, and it'll always basically just circulate. So when the pump is running, the water is circulating, but if you turn on a valve somewhere else and open it, there'll be pressure available to go through. So that's how I'm gonna keep things watered in here over the winter. But at the same time, you don't need to water that much when it's cold. But again, it's going to be above what it is in the greenhouse out there, because that one's not heated. So I will have to water, but you don't have to water that much. So that's all I'm going to show for this one, folks. There was a number of other things that on the property. Of course, it's a big property. It's 40 acres. I could do a lot more. I could show you the perennial stuff I put in this year, and maybe we'll save that for another video. But you guys like this video, smash the like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Hit the notification bell if you aren't seeing my videos. And I'm actually curious, leave a comment if you know this. Have you been subscribed to my channel before and you don't see my videos? I'm having a lot of people say that to me, and so, you know, makes you wonder why. But hit the notification bell if you don't have that, because then you'll actually see my videos when I post them. Check out my site, fromthefield.tv. It's where I post all my vlogs and the vast majority of all my content. All right, guys, we'll see you in the next one.